So, you want to save the world with clean energy? Make money doing it? Confused about the economic and technical realities of residential and commercial solar, batteries, heat pumps, EVs? Want the real-world scoop on new energy technologies, not manufacturer hype? Then tune in to the Weekly Energy Show, hosted by Barry Cinnamon. Insights from Barry's 40-plus years in the solar and energy industry will help you understand the future ways we'll generate and consume energy. And now, here's Barry.
Welcome to this week's Energy Show. Now this week, we're talking about world domination. Domination of energy production, that is. So putting on my best or worst Dr. Evil accent, why make gigawatts when we can make terawatts? All right, moving right along. Enough of that. The reality is, solar's on track to dominate the energy production business, especially for electricity, but also eventually for generating green hydrogen that we're going to use for process heat and industrial things like transportation. Solar's growing faster than wind, nuclear, and LNG ever did historically. It's an amazing growth path for a new energy technology. And the other reason why I'm so confident that solar is going to dominate energy production is the alternatives to solar cannot meet our needs. When we burn fossil fuels, which is the majority of energy that we get right now, we release energy. Great. We've always been doing that. Campfire, release energy. But you also release CO2. And we need clean energy. Now, we can make fossil fuel burning clean by removing or recapturing the CO2, but that requires a lot of energy. It's like a circle. So the reality is carbon capture and sequestration, or CCS, or direct air capture of CO2, DAC, these are systems that clean up the CO2 from fossil fuel burning, but inevitably, in every single case, the result is a process that's more expensive than generating energy from solar. Now, other alternatives like nuclear fission. Nuclear is okay. We've been using it. It works great. But we need more plants. The plants are old. And it takes over 20 years to build a new nuclear plant in the United States and over $10 billion. And some of the newer modular reactors, they're not even through the testing phase yet. So that's not reality. And then a lot of excitement about fusion. Over the past year or so, there's been results of great new tests where fusion power has actually shown that it can generate net positive energy. And it sounds like it's generating a lot of energy, but when you kind of look at the units, these fusion power systems are generating a net of about 1 candle power. So we're pretty far away from where fusion really can generate a lot of energy, even like nuclear, not even close to solar, and also scale. So kind of looking at the growth of solar, it's been a fantastic year for solar, and these years keep coming. That's what we're going to be talking about today. There's 2 reasons why solar's on track for energy domination. The first, the solar panels are a mass-produced product. So the result is the upfront construction cost of a solar power plant is lower than any other power plant. And then the second is solar power plants require zero fuel and negligible maintenance. So the operating costs are lower than any other power plant. So talking about this first point that solar panels are a mass-produced product, turning the clock way back to 50, 60, 70 years ago, the solar cells were custom made for satellites. And then there was very limited manufacturing of solar cells when we were building more satellites or people wanted to start using them for terrestrial applications. Back in the 70s, a single solar cell was costing $100 a watt. So a 5-watt solar cell would cost $500. And think about how much you need 60 solar cells for a solar panel. You're looking at the $30,000 solar panel that we have now. So, but then what happened is we started to do some limited mass production of solar cells and panels. And I watched as the costs went from about $10 a watt back in 2001 down to where they are right now, which is 20 cents a watt. Effectively, solar panels have gotten 50 times cheaper over the past 20, 25 years. Now, the numbers that I'm quoting about the cost of systems are for large quantities at the wholesale level, and generally these are solar panels from Asia, mostly China. Now we look at going from the panels to how we're able to achieve these mass production results. The manufacturers, as they've been ramping up, they've been taking the Henry Ford factory approach. Now, you can't take this factory approach for wind turbines because they're humongous and you got to generate, build them slowly. The numbers aren't there. Obviously, you can't take this factory approach for nuclear power plants. They're custom built for every site, every situation. And even for natural gas plants, you just don't rubber stamp them. There's a lot of custom construction. But for solar, it's rubber stamped. In these solar factories, you've got raw materials going in on one side and finished solar panels on the other. Now, taking it a step further, they're building entire square kilometer campuses in Asia where everything in the supply chain is dedicated for solar. You've got everything under one big 1 kilometer facility, and it's tremendously more efficient. So you just imagine where the input of solar panels, on the input side, you have sand going in for the glass, you've got silicon going in for the cells, you've got copper going in for the wire, you have silver going in for the connections, you have some fancy minerals and chemicals for the semiconductor process, polymers going in on one side for plastics and adhesives, wood for packing materials, and especially, it's as easy to forget, you need a lot of energy to run these plants. So you have integrated electric power plants, sometimes solar, sometimes gas and coal. So you've got everything going in, and the output on the other side are palletized solar panels. It's coming out on a pallet with 20 or 30 solar panels on there, and they just get loaded into semi-trucks. And then they're shipped all around the world. So believe it or not, the cost for solar panels, even though they've come down by a factor of 50 over the past 25 years, the cost for solar panels continue to decline, and efficiencies continue to increase. This trend will continue, maybe not at such a rapid rate, but still, solar's on track for energy production domination. The cost for solar power plants will continue to decline because the key electricity generating component, the solar panels themselves, keep getting cheaper. Now, the labor costs are going to gradually rise. The siting and the project development costs are going to continue to rise. But these increase in labor costs are in effect for all solar plants, for all construction. But solar panels are mass produced. That's why the reason why power plants are going to continue to get cheaper, because the key generating component, the solar panel, is mass produced. Whether it's a little 8 kilowatt power plant on your home's roof or a 500 kilowatt power plant on your local school or a 100 megawatt power plant at a remote utility solar farm somewhere in the desert, solar power is going to keep getting less expensive. So we have these solar power plants. They're cheaper to build than conventional power plants. They require no fuel and minimal maintenance. There is a downside. That downside is what we call intermittence. Basically, solar panels don't work at night or on really cloudy days. But there's a remedy to that. Battery storage is being added to almost every new solar power plant. All the utility power plants are building battery storage adjacently, and the majority of residential systems are going in with a battery. Because with a battery, that solar power plant with the battery can continue to produce power if a cloud goes over or even into the evening, maybe for 4 or 5 hours into the evening, depending on how many batteries there are. And for homeowners, for residences, and for commercial customers, you get power during a blackout. So the biggest disadvantage of solar, no power at night, it's gradually going away with batteries. And the batteries are getting less expensive and more popular. Now, realistically, we're still going to need some baseload power for the winter and for extended bad weather. But ultimately, I think this baseload power is going to come from green hydrogen generated from solar-powered electrolysis. We'll talk about that. Now, here's the thing. All solar power plants are similar in terms of the basic components and installation. They all have racking. They all have solar panels, obviously, wiring, inverters. Now they all have batteries, and they all have a connection to the grid. The only big difference is scale. A home system, 5 or 10 kilowatts versus 100 megawatts for a utility power plant. So we have these two kinds of solar power plants, utility scale, very large systems, and the other kind is rooftop solar or distributed generation. These are smaller medium systems. And as I mentioned, these systems are virtually identical, except for the connection to the grid and the size. And that connection to the grid is really important. So let's talk a little bit about rooftop solar. According to the National Renewable Energy Labs, rooftop solar has the technical potential to generate electricity equivalent to about 45% of all electricity sales in the U.S. at 2022 demand levels. Now, let's just call that 50%. Things are going to change. We're using more and more power, so our demand's obviously going to go up. And we have higher efficiency solar panels, so the production's going to go up. So just call it 50%. 50% of the U.S.'s electricity needs can be met with rooftop solar. The other 50% obviously should be utility scale solar. And these rooftop systems are going to go on homes, on businesses, on schools, on parking lots, everywhere where there's plenty of sun. Residential systems are going to be relatively small, 5 to 10 kilowatts. Commercial systems may be up to a megawatt. Now, the thing is, these rooftop systems, as we discussed, they all have to be connected to the grid. You have to obviously also connect the utility systems to a grid. The residential rooftop systems and commercial systems, they connect to the grid at relatively low voltages, typically 120 to 480 volts. Now, the excess power from these rooftop solar systems, basically they go to the nearby buildings via the local grid, also at this relatively low voltage. That's called the local electrical distribution system. Now, usually, there's no really big issues to connect rooftop solar systems to the local grid. Sometimes for really big rooftop systems, maybe a big school or a commercial facility, the utilities may require installing a bigger local transformer. Sometimes for residential neighborhoods, if there's a lot of solar in that neighborhood already and people want to put in more, they need to upgrade the transformer that's on top of a utility pole, or maybe the transformer that's on the side of the building. It may increase the cost slightly. It may cause some delays, but it shouldn't be a showstopper. On the other hand, very large utility scale systems, they don't connect to the local grid. They need dedicated transmission lines. There's no wires going to a solar farm in the boondocks in the desert somewhere. So in addition to the construction of the solar power plant, these utility scale systems need long distance transmission line construction. And that ain't easy. It's very expensive to build these transmission lines. You need to have land for the transmission lines. I mean, people aren't just going to let the wires go over their houses. So you got to route these things. You need the land. It's expensive to go through the permitting process to get all this land. There's construction costs. There's all kinds of other delays. There might be environmental issues that turn up. The result is building these long distance transmission lines for utility scale solar can take 10 years or more. So it takes a long time and it's expensive. So the reality is, at the rate our electric demand is growing all over the country, we need both utility scale and rooftop solar. Costs for both systems are declining due to the solar panel cost reductions. The racking, the wiring, the inverters, and all the other costs have also come down. And to a certain degree, the labor costs have come down because of faster installations. You see how the electricity rates are changing, but there are big cost differences between utility scale solar and rooftop solar when you look at power delivered to customers. Now, I'm going to just start with the graph of how fast electric rates have gone up in California delivered by the major utilities like PG&E. It's skyrocketed. I mean, we're talking about just the beginning of 2024. The rates went up 28%. They're going to go up again in March. It's huge escalations. And the reasons why these rates are going up are basically because of the long distance transmission costs. So let's just kind of back up a little bit. Rooftop solar rates, if you put in a rooftop solar system for your home and you look at all the costs involved, all the equipment, installation, maintenance over the lifetime of the system, those rates are about 10 cents a kilowatt hour here in California. And those rates are locked in for the life of the system. And you kind of compare that to the 74 cents a kilowatt hour that I'm paying right now in Silicon Valley at peak rates. It's crazy. So rooftop solar, way cheaper. And then you also compare that, and this is kind of a head scratcher for people, but we hear that utility scale solar can be generated for only 1 or 2 cents a kilowatt hour. That's really cheap. Some people say we need a lot of utility scale solar because it's really, really cheap. But that's a false comparison, because that low cost is the cost of building that utility scale solar farm. That's the cost of the electricity at the solar farm, 500 or 1,000 miles away, not at your meter. So once that power gets to customers, we can see it in our bills. The utility power averages about 40 cents a kilowatt here in California. And, during the evening peak times, people are paying over 70 cents a kilowatt hour for utility provided power. And those rates keep going up. Similar trends all over the country. And as I mentioned, the reason why these are so high is because of the transmission, construction, and maintenance costs and all the related utility overhead. You got to remember, utilities get a guaranteed rate of return of 12% per year on all of their transmission assets. So they're going to build as many as they can because it improves their profits. But it kills what homeowners, businesses are paying. And that's why rates are so high, pretty much in California and other places. When you look at the cost of delivered power to buildings or delivered cost of power to factories or homes or EV chargers on the highway, utility solar costs much more because of these transmission costs. And utility solar takes a long time to deploy. We can't wait. On the other hand, rooftop solar can grow really fast. There's almost no delays. A home says, hey, I want to put solar on my roof. A business says they want to put in solar, or a school wants to do it. I mean, these projects take, less than a year, maybe 2. And these systems are going on empty rooftops, so it's not that there's anything else that land is being used. There's minimal grid connection charges. You don't need to build high voltage transmission lines. And one of the other really important but subtle differences is the taxpayers and the ratepayers don't pay for those power plants. It's people who put in solar on their homes or businesses that are paying for it. So it doesn't come out of any kind of public funds. It doesn't affect the budget. It's great. These are investments that people are making. They're creating good jobs. So the growth of rooftop solar, it can be really, really fast, or it can be constrained. We're going through a time in California where the growth of rooftop solar is being suppressed, constrained by the utilities. So it depends on favorable policies by the utilities and by the state. These favorable policies are things like net metering, where you get credit for excess power produced and sent to your neighbors. At the same time, this power is credited to you at the retail rate, not the wholesale rate. So if you're paying 50 cents a kilowatt hour for electricity and you're sending that power back, usually you can get, 45 cents or so for that. Not full retail rate, but some of it really helps the payback. So looking at the curve over the past 20 years of the growth of rooftop solar, the curve keeps going up. The slope is getting steeper. It's pretty amazing, but that's due to continued lower equipment costs. And that's also due to higher and higher utility rates. So the combination of lower solar costs and high electricity rates from the utilities, they combine to make it even more cost effective to improve the economics for rooftop solar. And the result is very fast rooftop solar growth throughout the entire U.S. And this growth is happening at states with good solar policies, which until recently was California, but other states like Texas, Florida, wherever, and also states with high electric rates and states with a lot of sun. So those combinations, when they coincide, you result in really, really fast growth of solar. Now, kind of looking forward, what do we do? Solar can't produce power at night. It's intermittent. We need nuclear or gas for that. Well, let's talk a little bit about green hydrogen. People ask, quite legitimately, how is solar going to dominate the world for things like industrial process heat, for things like concrete and steel manufacturing, for things like heavy-duty transportation, trains, trucks, ships? The answer is with hydrogen. And you can generate hydrogen cleanly. It's called green hydrogen from solar-powered electrolysis. We all kind of watch these chemistry or physics experiments in high school, where if you take an anode, a cathode, run some electricity through some regular water, you get bubbles coming up. And those bubbles coming up are basically the water molecules, which are composed of hydrogen and oxygen. They split, and you're getting bubbles of hydrogen coming up and bubbles of oxygen coming up on the respective anodes and cathodes. So you can make green hydrogen completely cleanly, but you need a lot of electricity for that. And guess what? Solar can generate all that electricity. So there's a lot of R&D efforts, scaling activities to create green hydrogen, so we can then use that green hydrogen as fuel for long-distance trucking, where you can use that green hydrogen for industrial process heat to make concrete and to make steel. It just simply requires more utility scale and more rooftop solar. So you may have a green hydrogen factory next to a cement plant, and there might be a few acres of solar panels that are going to be generating the hydrogen to fuel those cement manufacturing facilities. It's all going to work. No doubt in my mind that the combination of utility and rooftop solar with battery storage, and ultimately with green hydrogen, it's going to be the future of our energy mix for the next 50 years. So if you're thinking about solar, don't worry. Solar's not going to go away. It won't be supplanted by nuclear fusion or clean fossil fuels or space-based lasers generating power and beaming it down to Earth. That's not going to go away. It's not going to happen in anybody listening to me in his lifetimes. The economics of solar are great now, and with higher utility rates, the economics of solar are going to continue to get better and better. All right, that's all the time we have on this week's Energy Show. Thanks to all of our listeners for tuning in. And if you missed any of today's show, you can go to the Energy Show website at energyshow.biz and listen to the podcasts.